BREWtallyspeaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. For over 30 years, Rockabilia has been the go-to destination for all things band merch. With over 500,000 items in their online store and collaborations with today's hottest bands, you're sure to find something you love. Use our code BREW10 at checkout and take 10% off your total order. So go pick up your favorite new piece of merch now over at Rockabilia.com. Now, on to the show.
Say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give up.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the BREWtallyspeaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is Joey and Blake of Pop Evil. Their upcoming album, What Remains, is coming out on March 21st via Monarch Heavy Music. It was really great getting to chat with these two, the two newer members of the band, and honestly, this is the first one I've done with someone from Pop Evil where Davey wasn't there. So it's kind of funny doing some of these chats with somebody where you're like, yeah, I'm having so-and-so from this band, and you just assume that you know it's going to be with the same person I always have on, but it's not. All that to say, it's still crazy to me. I know I talk about this almost every time we have someone from Pop Evil on, but, it's kind of hard not to talk about just the career that these guys have carved out for themselves, honestly. I've been around, like when I first moved to Grand Rapids and started coming to Grand Rapids, more importantly, Pop Evil was just, kind of on all local showcase would kind of be like the first or second band. So the fact that they're one of the few that's still around and honestly just continually evolving their sound and just kind of seemingly getting, bigger with every release, been kind of wild to see, especially, with most of the guys being from around here. It's kind of funny thinking about something that I feel like Pop Evil has been doing that has added to their success and the ability to sustain and maintain the career that they have is honestly just kind of doing things that they feel are authentic to themselves. And what I mean by that is, with, I think starting on maybe like the last record or the record before, I'm not entirely 100% specific. But I know from listening to some interviews and such with Lee, the vocalist, he kind of has been opening up recently about working with other songwriters. I mean, even the title track off of this record, What Remains, was co-written with Cody from Wage War. I know they've worked with Drew Falk, who has worked with a ton of bands. So it's one of those things where it's always interesting because I feel like that was sort of a dirty thing to talk about, like back in the day, like, oh, we were working with somebody and it's like, oh, you can't write your own music, or these other like weird misconceptions about, working with outside songwriters and such. And to me, it's like, you look at a band like Kiss, working with Desmond Child back in the day for I Was Made for Loving You. And Desmond Child alone working with a lot of different bands and working on some of arguably their biggest hits. And it's one of those things where, to me, I guess I just want a good song. So if a good song is going to come out of somebody working with somebody that's not in the band, I kind of don't care. I just want a good song. And to me, I also feel like it's sort of, if you take away just the idea of it's a band writing a song with somebody who's not in the band, and you kind of approach it more of like from a person perspective, like a people perspective, to me, it's one of those things where it's like you try to do the best that you can every day in whatever capacity that looks like. And I don't think anyone would put the same set of limitations on like, oh, well, like hiring a landscaper. You hired a landscaper when you could do it yourself? Oh, you hired someone to redecorate your house? You didn't do it yourself? Like, no one would ever fucking say that. You would be like, oh, like, who did you use? Oh, I really like what they did. I want to use them too. Yeah, same fucking thing happens in the music industry where it's like, hey, that guy is a good songwriter. Why wouldn't I want to work with him and see what could come out of working with somebody, because at the same time, like, the only band I can think of that gets the okay to write essentially the same album over and over and over and over and over again is AC/DC. They do it and everyone's like, fuck yeah, more of it. Anybody else were to do that, I feel like most people would be like, I'm fucking over that. Like, please do something different. So it's always sort of a double-edged sword, I feel like, that people live when you have to adhere by someone else's rules that isn't even in the room, isn't doing anything, has no bearing on anything, and they have the most opinions on shit. So all that to say, that's obviously how I feel about that. All that said, let's get into my conversation with Joey and Blake, and I'll talk to you on the other side of it. And we're good. So it's kind of interesting. Dave's done the last, I think we've done 3 of these. And then the last one was Dave and Haley. So it's been kind of interesting. I've been slowly collecting all the Pop Evil guys and gals over the last few years. But, you know, this is sort of an interesting thing because you two are the newer 2 in the band at this point. And obviously living here in Grand Rapids, you know, Pop Evil's sort of the local heroes of sorts and so forth. But I always kind of have this thought where I've talked about, I think what kind of allows a band to have longevity is sort of introducing new blood, because it's, you know, maybe something after you've been hitting the same places over and over for a decade plus, you're just like, yeah, here we are. And it's like, maybe you guys come in, you're like, oh, this is my first time playing this room, or I'm excited to hit this thing. And it brings in kind of that newness to something that's old. Do you feel like, on the other side of that, do you feel like that's something that you are aware of yourselves, kind of being the newer 2 in the band?
I mean, honestly, not much, only because we're both in other bands and have been touring during kind of the whole time as well. Play the same rooms. A lot of times it's more of like showing up to certain places and people are like, wait, you're not scheduled. Pop Evil is, you know, and they kind of,
we'll go into venues and we'll see posters and tour, you know, things that are reminiscent of the past where like our bands have played together before. And so it's actually really refreshing to get back into some of these rooms that we haven't been into in a while.
Yeah, I think to speak to what you're saying, though, it is true. And I think still for us, the way that we might approach everything from music to production to anything behind the scenes, I think that, you know, our opinions are new to the Pop Evil camp. And for Pop Evil, their opinions and some of the things that they've been really successful at are new to us too. And so like there's kind of this mutual respect and like swap of education that's been going on in the last couple of years that I think has put us at this point where we all feel like we're in the strongest project we've ever been in. So it's all been really positive. It really has.
It's funny you mentioned sort of the gaining of knowledge from each other through your various experiences individually and collectively, because as I've gotten older, I feel like that's something that I have thought about a lot more, and it sort of has a name called tribal knowledge. People earn different things, and then your tribes, essentially your elder statespeople, would give you the knowledge and pass it down. And it's one of those things where I don't really feel like we talk about that a lot in the music industry. It feels like it's almost like a lot of things are kind of gate kept for a while, but it seems like in the last, I guess really with the advent of, you know, YouTube being really a big platform that people can, you know, you can go to learn how to fix your sink or something, that it seems like we've kind of turned this corner where it's like the sharing of information and ideas is almost what everyone is searching for. So I think it's kind of interesting to hear you guys actually are doing that and kind of taking it in, because like I said, it's not something I feel like we really talk about or hear people talk about at the level you're at. It's just kind of like, we got here and it was just through eating shit in smaller bands until you just kind of earned your way. But the idea of like Lee and Dave, you know, teaching you guys something and maybe you being able to offer them a differing perspective just based on doing the same thing, I think is really interesting.
It really has been. I think, you know, we were friends with the guys for the last 20 years. So when we see them at festivals, it's very much that kind of like a relationship, like hugs and high fives. And but I think the last couple of years, and especially since Blake's come into the band, there's just this different kind of focus, I think, where we're all at in our lives. And I think that's why we're all so excited about the new record, and that's coming next year, is because it is this representation of all that earned or gained knowledge.
I think through some of the conversations I've had with Dave at Anchor Bar over the last little bit, it's a thing where, I know, kind of discussing where the band came from, how they, were a cover band, but they wanted to be more, and kind of paying the dues and kind of doing the things necessary to kind of achieve the career they wanted for themselves. Him talking somewhat in the last little bit of, we've been doing this for so long. We've been kind of doing it our way. We want to try to do newer stuff. And I, correct me if I'm wrong, this is kind of really one of the first examples, with the lead single of What Remains, where working with outside writers, Cody from Wage War doing, I think, the single, and I think there was some stuff maybe on Skeletons that was done with other outside writers. But how has that process been, writing with other people and kind of adding newness to something that, maybe some people would be like, oh, Pop Evil is this, and you get to expand on what that is for people now?
We love it. I mean, we've been pitching songs for a while, and, Joey and I work every day in our studio while we're home. So, to come up with an idea, put it together, and then to send it to Lee and the team of people, and them start to work on it and put it in the hands of another writer. It's just it's really nice to pass the baton and not have to, always run that race by yourself. It's very refreshing to be a part of such a massive team of writers and people that are just equally as ambitious as we are, and making some really, really good music too. It's pretty awesome.
Does it seem like the stigma of having people that you're collaborating with isn't as much of a big deal as it used to be, where it's like, you don't write your own stuff? And it's like, well, no, we're collaborating with other people. I find it interesting the more I do these things, or just kind of look at the industry as a whole and think about where it was, or what I perceived it to be growing up versus what it is now, that it's like, there was always this perception that everyone in a band wrote something. The singer probably wrote his lyrics, everyone came up with their parts and everything. And it's like, sometimes you find the band dynamic is maybe one person writes, or a person who doesn't even do vocals wrote all the lyrics. And so it just gets kind of interesting when you start breaking down how a band works. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of people just want whatever is the best to come out. Like, we want the best song, whatever that looks like, whoever wrote it, we just want the best thing. And I feel like, again, it's interesting to see how there's more transparency in that. And I feel like there still is a little bit of a stigma attached to it. But I don't know if you guys see it so much on your end, because it's sort of become the norm now.
I think
gave up on it a long time ago.
Yeah, but I think for Pop Evil, I think it's important for Pop Evil to mention that, the band is, especially Lee, is very, very, everything's very close to the chest. Everything that's being created, every nuance is being watched over by the band, is being discussed. And I think what people maybe don't understand is they think it's kind of like these collaborations are just kind of plug and play and it always works and it's always easy. But really, you do tons of collaborations to have one or two of them, sync up the way that you want to. And there is still something super special when you meet somebody else from another writer or whatever, and you inspire each other to create something new. And it is something that you're both into, and the whole band's into, and all of management's into. And as that reverberates, it becomes much bigger than any whole one person. And so that's very exciting, I think, for any artist to see the art become bigger than any one individual in the group. You know what I mean? And I think that that's what everyone at Pop Evil is celebrating right now. And I don't know that at this point we really care about the critic element of it. You know what I mean? Where you either are on board with the hard work we're putting in and the love that we have for our fan base, or you don't. And we're going to keep rolling either way,
Well, absolutely. I think it just gets interesting from, like I said, from my perspective, because it's like in almost any other instance, if we were to put that same prism onto something, I don't think anyone would even care. I think they'd just be like, did the thing get done? Is it as good as it can be? It's all that matters. Let's move forward. So why is it that in a creative endeavor, why does anyone give a shit now? And to me, I think that's where it gets interesting, is trying to break down like how people think and why does someone care about this little niche thing, but if I apply it to literally anything else, no, I don't care about that. It's like, it just gets interesting to me.
You know,
It's almost like if you're classify things.
Yeah,
You know?
if you have like have set like this is the way the music industry works, and then you pull back the sheet and it's totally different. You're like, I don't like this at all. But it turns out it's actually very common and great. And every time we collab with anybody on anything, whether it be album artwork or music or anything, we get better as artists and creators, because we start to see things from a different perspective. So collaborating to me has been one of the best things for me personally as a creator. So it's a good thing. It's a very good thing.
Yeah, I think something else you just kind of mentioned too, I think has been always interesting for Pop Evil is, and I don't know that, I feel like bands are starting to paying a lot more attention to this again, is sort of the visuals that represent either the new album cycle or whatever. And, the last couple, I mean, it's like, was it Versatile was kind of more of like a very kind of busy, like illustrative looking thing. So was, I think, the self-titled. Skeletons looked very like glitchy, kind of interesting. Like even now with the single artwork for What Remains, feels sort of like a throwback to like late 80s, early 90s, like kind of metal to a degree. So it's always been interesting to see how focused the band puts a lot of attention onto that as well, and almost kind of redefines themselves visually as well as, musically.
Absolutely. There's been honestly countless conversations about almost every element of the visual display, especially for this upcoming record. We've been working with Sam Shapiro, who's been doing stuff all over rock and roll for a long time. Incredible. Most people know him from his insane ability to fly a drone through festivals. Like he's like insane at that. But collaborating with that kind of a visual a curator, I think, has been something that the band has really, really enjoyed and has had such a strong opinion. But to see all of those things come to life in a way that feels honoring of the band's past, but then opens up doors to what the band could be going forward is really exciting for everybody who's a part of it, because it's like a bright future where you don't know the end of the adventure yet. And that's really exciting.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder if we've been kind of conditioned lately to just assume that we're going to get everything hand fed to us, like narrative, everything about everything. And there's not really a whole lot of inner reflection or self-searching when you're taking in something, in a creative mind space to how do I feel about it versus being, and you see this all the time. And I always want to comment, which is kind of counterintuitive, but you see someone, like if you guys were to post a new single or the album artwork, within seconds of you posting it, first to what? You didn't do anything. And half the time it's like you'll see like 7 of them and you're like, well, I don't think any of you were the first. But beyond that, I think it kind of gets to a point for me where, especially when it's a song that gets put out or something like that, or you're putting like the clip on like a reel or something, and people are just quick to hurry up, get through it, to give the first take, to be the first person with an opinion on this thing. And I always just kind of find it fascinating, because it's like, however long that took you to come up with, we'll just say since the last album or whatever. So it's been a full year since it took you to inspire, What Remains. Then you made a video for it. That took you however long to do all of that. And then you put it out and someone 45 seconds, and that's always the one that gets me, is I'm like, the song is like 3 minutes long. You replied 45 seconds after I posted it. You did not take all of it in, but more to that point, you didn't give it the time. And I feel like it just creates this thing where it's like, man, like that's got to be kind of disappointing to kind of be like, to put so much of yourself into this thing put it out, and like literally one of the first reactions is first, or here's a dissertation on it and how I felt about it, and you're like, let it grow with you a little bit, then maybe like give an opinion.
Like I yes, like reading any kind of comment, good or bad, it has an effect. It's either really positive, like this person really liked it, or you get a negative review, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I think for everybody in this band specifically, the act of creating it is what this is truly about, and that's the most joy, and then once it gets out, shut off the comments, if you will, and just on to the next song, because the working on a new thing is the most exhilarating thing.
And I think too, we're paying attention to the people that are our niche, our pop evil lifeblood, the people that are consistently positive, and that response we've learned, and are catering to our creative process, and the people that love how we do that, the people eager to like make it about something else. There's really just no keeping up with that. They have their own agenda, and it's rampant these days. So kind of just let it brush off you a little bit.
Yeah. On to the next.
Yeah. I feel like it's sort of interesting because like I feel like a lot of times I'm looking for what is what is a reaction to these things, like what are people saying beyond just yourselves, the fans, so on and so forth, because it kind of creates this sort of narrative between when I do this with someone, it's like, okay, I see things fans are saying, let me kind of find an interesting way to sort of talk about something, and it kind of makes them feel a little bit associated with this more personally. Kind of speaking to that. Yeah. You were saying that the album is coming out next year, so I'd assume, obviously can't give me dates, all that stuff, but how do you guys feel about the rollouts now? Because it's something I've talked about. I feel like, we're in this weird area where it's like, okay, the first promotional single comes out 8 months, 6-7 months before an album comes out. And obviously we all know that's due to a lot of different logistics, vinyl shipping and all that kind of stuff, or even routing for tours and all that kind of stuff to align. But how is it to What Remains has been out for not even a month yet, or actually almost 2 months now. But it's a thing to me where I feel like, do you like this long delayed release to get to an album, or would you guys rather just kind of be more immediate and like, here's a single, we came up with it maybe a month ago, check it out, and we're going to play it when we're on tour, and then we got another single coming out, and it's more a single based versus an album? Or which do you feel or find more enjoyable for as a creative?
Personally, I have enjoyed the fact that like the way that things have been done or always been done are constantly being challenged and or like given new perspective. And I think perspective is probably the word that comes to mind the most, is that like there's this way of like maybe finding the negatives in this new release strategy. But personally, I feel like it's given a lot more attention and detail to every song that a band puts out. Every individual song seems to have so much more worth, and as opposed to like the rush that I felt earlier in my career. It was like, look, you guys have 6 weeks, if you had a really good budget, to finish 10 songs, and everyone knows what an album cut is. You know what I mean? And like a lot of the times, the reason those songs are like that is I felt like they were unfinished. They were forced quickly, and the old structure kind of forced that. And I feel like this new one has almost been designed around independents that have been successful by doing this, not, being able to manage their budgets and all of the things that go on to be able to create that. As a fan, sure, I would love to be able to get an entire album and then just consume it, like be able to see the whole movie. But, I think songs have become episodic in a way, the same way, I'm actually enjoying seeing The Penguin as a long series, as opposed to maybe what it would have been forced into a prequel movie.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that's where we're at now, where people have a longer digestion period, and it does work for where the business is at. Everyone, if you look you don't have to look too deep to see why people are doing what they're doing. They need algorithmic feedback and all that numbers data stuff that's a part of it. But on the creative side, I don't think it's necessarily harming us. It's giving us the opportunity to really make sure everything that comes out means a lot. I think Ronnie Radke and Falling in Reverse is a perfect example. I mean, that story, the arc of this album, that's like one of the longest release arcs I've ever seen, and no one can say it didn't work. So,
yeah. Well, that was kind of the fun thing of, having a lot of friends that tour and do different stuff. Is for the longest time I looked at it, it was just like, why are we doing this? And I didn't understand, and I learned somewhat recently, and it's, the Falling in Reverse is a great example of this, where it's like that album came out and it already, because of how the DSPs, then reattach into the full thing. Now, instead of, okay, you got a week to make up your numbers, and we know that physical media isn't doing shit anymore. Typically, it's not doing what it used to do, that these long rollouts on the DSPs then add to the numbers. So when your record drops, you've kind of got that nice little headway. I guess it almost kind of goes back to like when albums would pre-ship, like if, really dating myself age-wise here, but like a Sam Goody or something like that would be like, hey, we know that this Pop Evil record typically sells blah, blah, blah. Why don't you go ahead and send us, 1,000 copies? And, you do that, everywhere, and, it ships out platinum or whatever. So it makes sense now, but as a fan of how it used to be, I was like, it just wasn't like this. Like, you got a song or two maybe, and then like you got the record, and, you kind of had to hope that you didn't get burned, essentially. And I always think that was sort of the change from how it used to be to what it is now, was artists would kind of front load, the album, and then the back half would be garbage. And people like, I spent $25 on this and it's mostly awful. And then it's like, iTunes came around, people could then buy what they wanted, a la carte kind of menu style. And I think it's just been interesting to kind of see how the industry has sort of changed with how they're rolling out things and why they do it. But I think, to me, as I think about it from a fan's perspective and a creative perspective as well, that it almost seems like it'd be more fulfilling to be able to put something out almost as soon as it's done, because it allows you to kind of have the freedom to go somewhere random for a single and be like, you know what, we were just feeling like 90s R&B kind of, and I know it's weird, but like this just was something we wanted to do. And you know what, if you don't like it, that's fine, because we're going to put out another song in 2 more months and it's fine, and you might like that one. So I see both sides, but I just wonder, like, on your end of things, like, how do you enjoy it? Because I feel like it's kind of hit or miss on either side.
I really like that not only are the rules of release being changed, but the idea that any given artist would establish the genre they're making young in their career and then be prison boxed into that genre for the rest of their career. All of that is going away. You're watching major artists switch genres consistently. And to me, that's the whole thing of artwork in the first place, is to break rules and see where it can go. And so for me, I just kind of celebrate the idea. And obviously it's a business. So you can use that as a reason and use examples of the business elements as to why it's a negative. But I think overall, if your desire is to get up and create every day, there's plenty of opportunity, and almost more now than there's ever been in humanity ever. So that, to me, that's exciting time to be alive,
Absolutely. I couldn't say better.
In the most generic of senses of the answer you can give, do you kind of push the boundaries and explore some of these things, like a Ronnie Radke or like a Jelly Roll, or some of these kind of bands are introducing, you listen to Octane now, and I was saying this with my wife the other day, where I was like, Octane's really interesting because right now it's full of the same bands that we've been listening to, your Askings, your Memphis Mayfires and so forth. And then you got sort of and I don't remember who the other band was, but they did that track with Gideon, the Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is, where it's kind of country heavy, genty kind of style, thing. And Octane's kind of leaning into this thing where it's kind of like rock, country, not quite really one or the other. It's kind of a really good blending of both. Like, when you see things like that, are you guys trying to not follow a trend, but like, does that give you sort of the permission or the excitement, I guess is a better way to say it, to be like, man, like I want to dip my toes into this and just kind of see like what can I pull out of myself in this genre that maybe I've not really explored before or felt comfortable to explore.
Well, I think for he and I as a writing team, we've been writing multi-genre music for a really long time. And there was a point in our careers where we were writing songs that feel like that consistently a long time ago. So it's exciting to me to see, this evolution, because I mean, none of us expected it, but we kind of knew it was coming, and so to see it happening, it's anything that smashes down some decided on wall is exciting, especially in music to me.
I think too, like, especially for Pop Evil, there are songs that are older in the catalog. Perfect example is like 155, or even Deal with the Devil, that actually now, as you come back around and view them through a half country, half rock tinge of Americana, lens, they make sense in a whole different way. They become cool in a whole new way. And I think that's something that kind of, I think, stirs us in conversation, is that, like, is there a way to be able to write songs that feel honoring of what's happening now, that are also genuinely still the Pop Evil they've always been, which is a hardworking blue collar band from Michigan. And I think, I'm from Chicago, he's from Little Rock. We all grew up the same way, and I think that's why we all get along. But I think that's exciting too. I mean, Pop Evil's in such a cool spot because we've been able to kind of do that. I mean, early Pop Evil and current Pop Evil are not necessarily the same. You know what I mean? And I think
No.
and Blake and I may not have really even fit into old Pop Evil the way that we fit into new Pop Evil. And I think that the bands, and Lee specifically, having kind of like the open-mindedness to continue to change and morph and evolve is a big part of why we're at this precipice now. So I do see exactly what you're saying. We talk about it. You're 100% spot on the trends that we're all talking about on the bus and everything too.
Well, I think like that sort of becomes the interesting thing is, like last night, like my wife and I came, we one of the bartenders at Anchor, I'm working there again, but I'm still a regular, which feels like that old hair client guy. I'm also a client, and I'm the president of the hair club for men. But we were there last night, and then when we were coming home, we just randomly got on like a 90s like R&B playlist, and my wife picked like a year. And then I just started, I was like, oh, this is, Candy Rain. And I was like, oh, this is Candy Rain. And she was like, I've never heard of this. And I was like, this has recently been one of like we got back into that song. I love this song so much. And we were just kind of talking about, now you're starting to see, or I feel like I'm starting to see a lot more R&B influences of what I grew up with making its way into, the current metalcore and stuff like that, where it's like, and even some of like the electronic elements kind of remind me a little bit of like different things. So it's funny to be a fan of a lot of different genres of music and kind of seeing where people are pulling stuff. I mean, look at T-Pain covering, Black Sabbath. And it's like, I'm sure to his demographic of people, they're probably like, I've never heard Black Sabbath ever in my life. All of us that grew up on it are like, yo, this is kind of cool. An R&B twinge to a classic Black Sabbath song. Like, this is kind of rad. So it's almost like the blurring of genres and everything is happening right now. But I also think it's been interesting too in the last couple of years, something from my perspective, like nu metal is coming back. And it's so weird because it's like, man, I remember when nu metal, when it was happening, and wasn't a singular sound. It was everything. It was like industrial, electronic. It was, straight up metal. It had rap. It had like everything in it. And now there was a point where it was like, yo, that shit's whack. I never listened to any of these fucking bands. These bands suck. And then now we're coming back where it's like, yeah. And then it's like, now you have people coming back and it's like, it's becoming part of the sound. It's getting integrated with, like the heavier side of like, like an Animalist Leaders might use like kind of a nu metal-y part or something. And it's like, it's weird to see it come back. And it's like, this is, I guess, what getting old is when you listen to music, is kind of like these things come back, but it's like, how are they coming back? How are the newer people reintroducing something that's old and making it new again? And to me, I feel like, if, again, being in your guys' perspective, being roughly my same age, going through all of these same things, you know, I could see someone like Dave maybe being like, oh man, kids are fucking with this shit now. Like, yo, I used to like, and I'm just making this up. It's like, I used to really fuck with like Faith No More. And now like this shit's kind of cool again. So like, I got a Faith No More riff I've been holding on to since like forever. And then kids now are going to hear and be like, that's so cool.
I think we actually had that exact conversation with Dave.
With Dave about some riffs that he has. Like, yeah.
Say it like word for word.
I mean, I
repurposed, you know, those kind of ideas.
Yeah. How many of those ideas? What is the longest thing you guys collectively have written together that just never worked for whatever reason, and then you finally got it to work? Like, do you have I'm sure you have at least a story somewhat recently of something like that happening where you're like, I forgot about this.
Since I've been here the last 4 or 5 years, everything has been so new and everything has been focused on it being new, that you've seen bulks of songs that have been cut, that there's actually quite the reservoir of songs that could be used later on that we have now over the course of the last 2 or 3 records. So, I mean, Lee's kind of set a precedent that like, it's going to be a certain standard for the records that he wants to put together right now. And then everything else just doesn't make it, you know? So, which is cool. I actually, I mean, I love that he has such a specific idea of what he wants the records to be like. And Blake and I really enjoy helping him craft that goal.
And I feel like I would be remiss to kind of, as one of before, having you plug socials and all that kind of stuff. But as honorary Grand Rapids people, what do you enjoy about the city as kind of becoming, you know, honorary, you know, Grand Rapids people through the band? How has that been getting to kind of have a new home?
Yeah,
the
food scene I have no doubt for me that it's the food scene in Grand Rapids is awesome. Like, I had no idea how many great restaurants are there. I think I had one of my favorite hamburgers I've ever had downtown. I think it's just a number. Is the
that was the first place
next to the theater. 818 or something like that.
That was it.
Yeah. But there's some really good food there. So that's that's my thing everywhere. I should weigh about 7,000 pounds. But I really love the food scene.
Same.
Same.
And honestly,
he does weigh 7,000 pounds. Huge lower.
What I know about Grand Rapids, having known Lee and Dave since like 2007 or 2008, is that the group of people that surround those two guys are amazing people and support those two like I've never seen it before. I mean, I remember this one guy drove up to one of the shows in this Pop Evil vehicle. He took his car and put their logo on the hood of it and on the side of it and everything. And he's like, look what I made for you guys. And I just remember thinking, this community is in like full support of these dudes. So to me, I you know, I'm sure I sound like a politician, but the people that are in this community in Grand Rapids are amazing people. And that's the most.
You should run.
I'll be the spokesperson for the rock metal scene in Grand Rapids. I'm not from here, but
I think that was something through becoming a regular anchor over the last, you know, decade plus. Seeing a lot of it firsthand, you know, the running joke, I think now between I know at least Dave and myself, and I'm pretty sure it's with all of you guys, is literally how fast from a hometown show can he get off stage and to anchor. And I think if memory serves, I think this last one you guys did New Year's Eve 2 years ago, I think he said he got from stage to the bar in about 12 minutes.
With a shower. With a shower in between.
Yeah, with a shower. Yeah. So
next time we're calling him at the bar, we're like, hey, we get 2 more songs. Gotta get back.
But I was going to say, I think what gets interesting about that, and for those that don't know, I've talked about working at that bar and talked about the bar in general on the show quite a bit. But I was going to say, it gets to a point where like it is a dive bar, it is full of family, and I think it's one of the first experiences I've really seen where everybody knows after the Pop Evil show that's where you go, and it gets interesting because I feel like I would assume fans that are coming to hang out like that, it's like usually you would have that like the overzealous like Punisher type, and it's like in all the years I've seen of people coming after the shows and the band hanging out at that bar, I've never seen it. It just feels like an extension of family and like what already exists in that bar. So it's one of the first experiences I've really ever gotten to see so closely with a band at like your guys' level in a hometown scenario. So I assume as the two outsiders, like you definitely probably feel that as well.
Oh, for sure. I will tell you a very cool story for me about the Anchor Bar, and that is that I've been there before, and so has Blake, but we were in Europe the last time with Pop Evil traveling around, and we found in Germany another Anchor Bar. It was called the Anchor Bar, and Dave and we all went in. I don't know if you know this, and we called the owner and sent a picture of the Anchor Bar back to the Anchor Bar, and I think somehow they had our pick. They put up our picks and stuff in the one in Germany, and then we did something like we put like a coaster from the Anchor Bar in that one. And trying to spread the love of the Anchor Bar all over the world. But Dave was like, he was very serious about getting it done. It was
Same.
like he wasn't messing around. He had a loyalty and does have a loyalty to that bar. It's very Cheers-esque,
I think the craziest thing is in Buffalo, there's an Anchor Bar, and Patrick, formerly of Ice Nine Kills, owns a bar down that way. But when we do this, sometimes we'll talk about bars. I'm like, yeah, because we'll take him to Anchor when he would tour, and so we'd have to my Anchor Bar here in Grand Rapids. But the weird thing is there's a bar in Buffalo that doesn't exist anymore, the Pink. But right next to it is a bar called Mulligan's, and in Easttown in Grand Rapids we have Mulligan's. So like my wife and I always go to Mulligan's because we're like, I don't know, it's weird. It's like it's not our Mulligan's at all, but it's like it's Mulligan's, so like we got to go. So it is weird when you have sort of an affinity to a bar and then you find sort of the doppelganger bar somewhere else, and you're like, I got to go. But last question for you guys: where can anyone find you, or anything you would like to plug online?
Well, for the band, obviously there's popevil.com, at popevil or @popevil official for all the social media stuff. And then for us personally, I'm at Joey Chicago Walser on Instagram. You can find my link to everything else. And I am Blake Allison.
That's me.
That's him. Come say hey.
That's where you can find me on Insta.
Sneak in my DMs.
Yeah.
Actually, don't.
DMs.
Sneak in his DMs.
Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time, especially right before the kickoff of the tour. Tell Doc Hoyle and Kyle and all the guys in Bad Wolves I said what's up. And if you go out with Kyle, make sure to get all the sweet sugary shots, because that's what he enjoys.
Yeah, will do. I'll bring that up. Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your day, guys.
Appreciate you, man.
So that was my conversation with Joey and Blake. Want to thank them once again for taking the time. I believe, if memory serves correctly, this was the first date of the tour they did with the Bad Wolves guys to end out their year. And I honestly should have hit up Kyle from Bad Wolves and asked if Joey and or Blake ever ended up doing some delicious shots with him at any point on the tour. It was funny. My wife and I were just talking about that the other day. We were at a venue where we went and met up with the Bad Wolves camp one of the last times they were here in town, and someone mentioned shots. It might have been Kyle. It might have been my wife or I. I honestly don't remember at that point. But it was funny because actually, I guess it had to have been us. And because I remember just Kyle being like, yeah, I don't really like doing like hard shots and stuff like that. I like to do like fruity, delicious shots. And we're like, my guy, you came to the right two people. Like, that's right up our alley too. Like, we're in the chocolate cakes, white gummy bears, like all those kind of things. Like, because the point is it's delicious and you're not just getting fucking loaded. And I think that's like a kind of a weird thing. Like, I'll still do, Ferraris and Fernet and Jaeger and all those like heavy shots of whiskey. Like, I'll still do that. But sometimes it's like, I don't want something that's like that. You know, you want something that's easy to drink and more of a social thing, like that everyone will do together and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of funny to learn that Kyle had a predilection for some delicious shots. So hopefully the Pop Evil and Bad Wolves camps were able to have some good times at a bar after a good show, ripping some chocolate cake shots. I would really love to see that, actually. It was funny too. Since this, I actually remember since this conversation happened, Davey Gross from Pop Evil, when I was back at Anchor one day on a Sunday, it was his birthday, and we inadvertently were there for a little birthday celebration that a bunch of friends and family put together for him, and got to spread love to the Anchor bar. It's funny. Someone was asking the other day when I was working. They're like, "Where did you guys get these like photos?" Because we have a couple of promo photos. One of Pop Evil and one of another local artist here in Grand Rapids, who took their album cover at one of the booths at our bar. And so someone was just like, "Who are these people? Why are they on the wall?" And then you kind of had to explain the backstory of like, "Oh, well, this is a band, and one of the guys comes here all the time, and the other guy that literally was taken at this booth right here, you can clearly see it." So it's kind of interesting, kind of explain that to someone. Like I would have assumed, as you heard me say at the end of this chat, like typically when Pop Evil plays a local show, it's pretty much a known thing that hurry up and go to Anchor. So I guess if you're ever coming to a hometown Pop Evil show, chances are you'll probably see me, and you will probably definitely see a whole slew of people at Anchor Bar. Come in, get yourself a beer and a shot, and crank up some music and have a good time. All that said, let's start wrapping up the episode. Again, I just want to remind everyone, What Remains is coming out via Monarch Heavy Music on March 21st. You can still go get some pre-orders and all that kind of stuff right now. Pre-save on the DSPs, whichever one you use. Honestly, you can just head on over to popevil.com. That'll be your landing page for all the socials, all the pre-order bundles, anything you want to know about the band, it'll be there. But if you'd like me to spell it out for you, Facebook Pop Evil, Instagram Pop Evil, Twitter Pop Evil. If you'd like to keep up with Joey, you can find him on Instagram at Joey Chicago Walsler, I think is how you say his last name. I'm so terrible with names. I can't remember half of them, and then I don't know how to pronounce the other half. I didn't see a Twitter account for Joey. I tried looking a few different ways. I didn't see one, so if anyone's got it, shoot me a message, let me know. And then as far as Blake, you can find him on Instagram at I am Blake Allison. And over on Twitter, you're going to find him at BlakeDTD. It's funny, I kept wanting to say Balake, just because I have been also on a rewatch of of some Key and Peele, and the substitute teacher that Keegan-Michael Key plays.
You done messed up, Aaron! Now take your ass on down to Oshag Hennessy's office right now and tell him exactly what you did.
Who?
Oshag Hennessy!
Principal O'Shaughnessy?
Get out of my goddamn classroom before I break my foot off in your ass! Insubordinate and churlish.
I really hope you enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed putting it in. And to kind of finish wrapping up this episode, if you want to go over to rockabilia.com and pick up some merch for the music lover in your life, use their code BREWtally at checkout. Take 10% off your total purchase order. They have so many great items in their online store, adding so many things, constantly different collabs with the new and established bands, all kinds of stuff, like the Milo from Descendants toy that has officially been launched. I know there are some more coming through the pipeline, as well as some other things that I'm going to tease, and yeah, I'm just going to tease it. I know I've been kind of talking about some other things, but some things are in the work. I'll just leave it at that. And for the podcast, you can email me at brewtallyspeaking@gmail.com. Rate, review, subscribe. You know why that's important. Do it if you can on whatever you are listening to this on. And for the Brewtally Speaking podcast, I am John, and I will see you all next week with the riff lord himself, Mr. Kirk Winstein from Crowbar, from Down from Kingdom of Sorrow. He returns. That was a fun chat. I will see you all next week. Enjoy the rest of yours.